Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're watching. Welcome to today's webcast, How AI is Improving the Employee Experience. I'm Dan Turchin. I'll be your host for today. CEO of PeopleReign. PeopleReign is the AI-first system of intelligence that automates IT and HR employee service. Our virtual agent speaks 27 languages, and it's pre-configured to answer about 5 million common work questions. If you have questions for the panel during today's session, go ahead and use the Q&A panel. We're using On24 for the hosting of today's event. Right after we wrap up the panel discussion, you'll be asked to participate in a survey by On24. Please do that. We would love your feedback. Today's event is co-hosted by our great partner, Thirdera, the largest pure-play provider of ServiceNow services. We're also joined by an exceptional panel of experts who will be sharing what they're doing to deliver better employee experiences. Today's topic is particularly relevant in light of the Great Resignation that's underway. I'm going to go ahead and first tee up the discussion, and then we'll get right into the panelists. In the fourth quarter of 2021 alone, more than 4 million US workers quit. That's about a 10x increase from what we'd normally expect. Out of the top 7 reasons they cited, not one was related to compensation. There's something going on here. An astonishing 76% say they're leaving for jobs that are more meaningful, more fulfilling, and where they feel more valued. The pandemic really changed our expectations about what work is all about. More than ever, we demand trust and respect. We realize life's short and relationships outside work are really what determine our quality of life. Couple those trends with record low unemployment and record high inflation, and it's obvious why the best employers are investing in motivating and retaining key employees. At PeopleReign, we understand the tight correlation between employee experiences and customer experiences. And we're talking a lot about that with the panelists. This employee experience maturity model that you see was developed with leading CIOs and CHROs who believe employees who are inspired to do their best work are the ones who inspire customers to become brand ambassadors. This was based on feedback from about 250 CIO and CHRO conversations we've conducted over the past 12 months. Engaged employees, as you see here in the chart, show up to earn a paycheck. But as employees move to the right on that x-axis, they become inspired by their work. And their enthusiasm translates into better work products, which deliver better business outcomes by creating customers that move up that y-axis. They become motivated to invest their personal time and energy into evangelizing your product or service. We believe the principles of AI and machine learning can be applied to improve employee experiences. It's the fastest way to deliver better customer experiences. It's the best way to outpace the competition, and it's the best way to improve customer loyalty. More than ever, owners of the employee experience own the strategy that will ultimately deliver better business outcomes. Today's discussion will offer actionable tips from a few real pros to help you get there. Some of the key topics we're going to be covering, kind of moving from the bottom of the pyramid to the top, we'll be discussing things like how does the employee experience impact the customer experience, and how are you in your role investing in better employee experiences? And perhaps most important, like I said, we're going to make sure this is actionable for you. So we're going to ask the panelists to discuss what's ahead. Without further ado, I'm so proud to welcome today's panel of experts. Let's go one by one. If you could come off mute as I share your name and give us a little bit about your background, your role, and what your thoughts are for today's discussion about improving the employee experience. Let's start with Wendy Pfeiffer, CIO of Nutanix.
Hi, so I'm Wendy Pfeiffer. I'm the CIO of Nutanix. I also serve on several boards. I'm on the board of Qualys, publicly traded cybersecurity company, SADA Systems, GCP's #1 partner, and the board of the American Gaming Association. I'm the only technology company exec on this casino board. You know, as I think about the employee experience, I am in the midst of trying to understand how to enable multi-generational employees to be productive in the hybrid world of the future, a world infused with both technology and in-person experiences. And I'm very excited to learn from and join in the panel today.
Thanks for joining us. Dr. Mamoon Samaha from International Technological University.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody. My name is Mamoon, and I've done several CTO positions with Motorola, HP, and Google as well. So I'm going to give two examples on the employee experience. I might give very practical example from working 20 or 30 years in IT and supporting customers and as well as employees. So I'll give more into the customer experience from accessing resources, mainly the impact on the customer experience in relative to AI. Also, I'll talk about the effective engagement, because employees like to get engaged, and so I'll just give a few points on that. So one is technical and one is on the engagement. Thanks.
Joel Eagle from McDonald's.
Oh, hi, it's Joel Eagle with McDonald's. I've had about 30 years in IT. I know I look young, but that's true. And across that, I've had a number of titles, a number of positions throughout that. I think in the last couple of years was something unique to that entire span of experience, right? No matter what my role was. And I'm looking forward to talking about a little bit of how we personally address the employee engagement experience and some of the things Mamoon had mentioned, specifically at McDonald.
Jason Moyan, CEO of Third Era.
Thanks, Dan. CEO, co-founder of Third Era, ServiceNow pure play consultancy, one of the really only global pure play consultancies in the market today. Also Fast Company executive board member as well, and have really spent my last 25-ish plus years in technology, helping, outsourcing consultancies, IT service management, really focused on digital transformation, things of that nature. So excited to be here today. Thanks.
Excellent. First question I'm going to toss out. Let's get Joel's perspective first. Joel, you heard some of my opening comments about the Great Resignation. Would love to hear from your perspective, your team, and maybe McDonald's as an organization. Are you feeling the impact of the Great Resignation? And if so, what are you doing to combat it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as everyone is, we've had a number of people leave our organization as well as come into organization. A little bit of factoid there. I think we hired something like 1,000 office workers in the last year, right, for COVID. And so if we've lost some, we've gained some. So we're seeing both sides of that. The resignation for us, a lot of it's about people figuring out that they don't need to come to the factory every day. In terms of the commute time, whether it's in Chicago, that's usually trains from the suburbs, et cetera. We also saw that where when we went to work from home suddenly, thrust into that with COVID, productivity actually went up. And we thought that would be short term because people knew it was a trying situation, but it actually was productivity went up and it was sustained. And it has been sustained throughout, as well as our global colleagues actually prefer not being the only one that's on a teleconference. So I'd love to get more into that if you want to explore that. But there's a double-edged sword, I would say. It's been good, and it's been interesting in terms of dealing with people who want that flexibility.
It's one thing for productivity to go up, but how do you keep remote employees engaged? I've been to that beautiful new HQ in downtown Chicago. I think it might have opened in 2019. And I can only imagine the impact of not being able to rub elbows with colleagues like we were able to do in 2019.
Yeah, like a lot of places, we had to put some protocols in place around video conferencing, for example. We had to do some accepting of things when it comes to having people at home. So, for example, children, pets, this needs to be part of the experience. So we actually had people, I've had meetings where I think one of the most productive meetings I've ever been to is where two of our employees each had a 1-year-old, and the 1-year-old was sitting on their lap, and the 1-year-old started making sounds, and we all stopped for a second, let them have a chat. And I thought that might be the most intelligent thing I've heard all day. And you just make that part of your day, right? And you say it's okay if the doorbell rings or you need to get up there, you make life okay as part of what you're doing at home. And you accept varying levels of, I'll call it quality, and you help people have the tools they need where they are, right? Whether that's the equipment they need to have that, or internet access, et cetera, right? So we put a lot into making sure people had what they needed and could mesh work life together versus trying to hard and fast separate.
Wendy, you lead technology for a technology company. How have you found how do you compensate for the lack of the ability to brainstorm on a whiteboard in a room? And what have you been doing to combat the Great Resignation?
Well, first of all, Joel is spot on. I really connect with the comments that he's making. The way we move forward is in a very people-first kind of way. Since 2018, we've had a change in the technology workforce in general, and that was the year that Gen Zers started joining our workforce, and in larger numbers in the technology space. Gen Zers are multi-threaded, they're multitaskers, and that gaming or Discord experience of I might have multiple identities and ways that I'm showing up, and I might be participating in multiple forums at the same time, multitasking. Anyone who's watched their teenagers do homework with a game on one screen and the homework on one screen and something else going on. That's the way that this digitally native generation has been acculturated. And so how do we compete with that, or how do we enable that with enterprise technology and in the context of the enterprise? We're used to these office buildings pre-COVID. There are these containers. We put people in the jail of the cubicle, and then in that cubicle they must pay attention to what we want them to pay attention to. It turns out that might be productive for some generations, but that is anti-productivity. That dampens productivity for Gen Z and some millennials. And so for those folks, we focused on making the hybrid work experience as consumer tech-like as possible, so that they're in a context that's most productive. We're talking to each other over public internet. I'm using my work computer. I'm using my gamer setup for microphone and camera and my big display, because I'm most comfortable with that. Sitting in a comfy, cozy chair from my living room. It's this blend, this hybrid thing, and a particular place, an office can't compete with that, but an office can be a purposeful place where we come together for certain types of collaboration. And so I think it's almost about a higher level of thinking, having the capability to hold more than one thought in our heads at the same time, to offer a multi-threaded experience and use technologies that enable that multi-threaded experience for employees, meeting them where they are.
Jason, the pace of growth at Thirdera over the past 12 months, I'd say, is legendary. And I made a comment on social yesterday about how Thirdera is really a role model for how to create great company culture. I've seen some of the things you do internally, and just amazing work keeping the team engaged as you grow the team at breakneck speed. What are some of the secrets to your success keeping employees motivated?
Yeah, well, part of it is the sector we're in. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I was building ServiceNow companies and consultancies, as you know, Dan. And at that point in time, we were largely remote then too. We were largely using digital tools and teleconference and Zooms and Teams to communicate then. What was interesting, though, is at the time, we would have an awful lot of customers saying, I want you here in my conference room, or I want you here on site. And at that time, we would always push back and say, no, we need to use the right tool for the job. There are modalities of work that happen better in an office, and there are modalities of work that happen better in a home office situation. I always used to kind of say, when you look at developers, where are they going to be their best developers? Going to be in your conference room on their laptop screen, or is it going to be in their home setup with their big monitor and plenty of screen real estate and their ultra fast internet? Obviously that's going to be the better place for that. And so we had already sort of seen that being in the cloud segment. I think that work progression was happening, well before COVID really kind of accelerated everything. But in the last year, since we founded the company, We've acquired 5 companies. We've hired literally hundreds of people, just over 600 resources at the company across the globe, 12 different countries. That is a lot to bring together when you can't physically go meet them where they're at and go have conversations. And so, we had replatformed the entire company into very modern systems. We're 100% in the cloud. You can access your systems on any device, anywhere, securely, with very little effort. And we spent a lot of time making sure that our platform at Thirdera was kind of future ready in that regard. That's made a huge difference. And then, I think we spend an awful lot of time just being vulnerable. It resonates with me that, you get children on a call or something like that. Obviously, when we're working with our clients, we're putting a much more professional foot forward. But when we're working internally, we kind of take that down a bit and are willing to say, hey, listen, I know you have family. I know you have dogs or cats or what have you. That's okay. Introduce us, right? Let's bring them into the conversation for a minute, and then let's get back to work. And for me, that's been a welcome distraction and just a really good opportunity to get to know folks in an environment that was not an easy environment to get to know folks in.
Mamoon, you run technology for a remote-first university. How in the world do you create digital experiences for faculty and staff and students that create an effective learning environment? It's a different challenge than any of us have. What have you done to manage the situation?
Yeah, thanks. Regarding the workplace in education is very, very different. Everybody want to be unique and get an opportunity to show his skills to his students as well as management. So the workplace is a little bit changed now. And to be remote, again, to other speakers' point, we are probably aligned with the same. Remote access tools are critical. So because for the students as well as the professors to have an impact, they need the right tools. They need a lot of resources. They need to produce things in a very, very fast speed and to make it perfect experience for the students. So we implemented our own video conferencing, and scalability was an issue for us. So we ended up with Zoom, with Google Plus, and many other tools. We tried all those tools, and we decided on a solution that is very, very low cost, and it allows every student to reach to the employee or to the faculty, as well as the faculty to a huge number of students. So we've implemented this all over the place. Now, in terms of using AI, one of the issues was the remote access and the cybersecurity issue, because when you work from home, we are concerned about the endpoint. The student have a laptop, we don't know what's the configuration. The faculty have a laptop, we don't know what's the configuration. And how would you catch anomalies on issues? So we ended up improving the security a lot in ITU, and we are relying a lot on AI, cybersecurity tools. Many companies are investing in this, but the BlackBerry already have an acquisition, and based on that, a couple of companies build tools that can catch the anomalies and issues without going to the professor or the students' tools in their house. So the edge of the network in the university and how we address security was critical, because we want to predict, we need a predictive AI, artificial intelligence. We need to know if a student or in Zoom has been logged in a different context. We need to capture all the anomalies using AI to capture. Traditional tools will not work for us. So AI was very, very critical to monitoring access in terms of behavior as well as predictive. So that's on what we have.
So I shared my thoughts from the 250 CXO conversations we had at PeopleReign, some primary research we did about the relationship between the employee experience and the customer experience. But you're the experts, and you're quote, customers are all wildly different. I'd be curious to get all your perspectives, and we can go in any order you'd like, but how you see the relationship between a better employee experience and a better end customer experience. I'll toss it out to the panel. Who'd like to jump in first?
Maybe I'll start. Shall I start?
Please, Wendy.
Okay. We believe that we can measure employee happiness and that there's a direct correlation between employee happiness and employee productivity. We've been measuring that for the last couple of years. And we believe that technology plays a part in the employee experience, creating a more frictionless, more natural, more personalized technology experience helps. We believe that flexibility in terms of work location, work hours, and even work methods helps. And ultimately what this drives to is this. We think that personalization of the employee experience, meeting the employees where they are, but also enabling them to show up in ways that they want to, that are fairly individualized, that is a key component of employee happiness. In fact, companies that have not figured out how to do that well, companies that have been more prescriptive in how they want employees to work, they have been most affected by this Great Resignation among companies that employ knowledge workers. So, all right, bold move. We've declared that we're going to try to make employees happy or happier with the technology experience, and that then should result in more productive employees. We've been measuring that. We use some tools to measure that. We use a tool from a company called Worklytics and another tool from a company called ActiveTrack. We also measure employee NPS, Net Promoter Score. We use a tool from a company called CIO Pulse. And we have been able to essentially run some experiments. Every time we create a more frictionless employee experience, when we work on that interaction design and give employees more autonomy, when we support asynchronous work in that employees don't have to all be in the same room in the same time zone to make a decision or get information, this sort of improves the employee's perception of goodness and happiness, and that directly correlates to our measurements of productivity. And I would submit that might even be the reason why, at McDonald's, for example, you notice that employees were more productive when they pivoted to work remotely. It's not just an elongation of work hours. It's also that infusion of some other happier components. And so from our perspective, we're now actively trying to tune that happiness factor, that employee experience factor, measuring the results of that, taking that as input in the same way that we might develop a product. We're iterating on the employee experience with the tooling, the work structure. There's lots of components to this that are not technical as well. Organizational structure, role definitions, the role of middle management and how middle management interacts with employees, and even allowing employee choice and employee input. All of these are factors that we're trying to design into the workplace. And finally, our physical workplaces as well. We're trying to make those workplaces purpose-built. We're changing, we have some nice campuses, but we're changing the layout of those campuses and the nature of the internal spaces in those campuses to support the reasons that employees want to get together in person. And of course, some of this is done with some trepidation, right? This is new stuff for companies. Is it possible, for an engineering team to make progress collectively across time zones without sitting in a room with a whiteboard? The answer is yes, but that takes some planning and some design as well. Ultimately, what we've learned is the lesson of metadata, the data that we collect from our operations, we learn from that data, and we use that data to fuel the way that we work. The resulting infrastructure and ecosystem is actually complex. We are supporting many different kinds of employee experiences, and we've learned we cannot do that manually. And so this has really accelerated our use of AI and machine learning technology. So pre-pandemic, we had a focus on adopting AI and machine learning tooling to run our operations. And pre-pandemic, about 25% of our services were delivered fully autonomously. Today, we deliver about 85% of all of our services fully autonomously, end-to-end, including the interaction, natural language processing, et cetera. And at the same time that we've done that, we've seen employee NPS rise dramatically. So we now enjoy about a 95 average employee NPS from all of their interactions with the company.
Amazing. Joel, your end customer is a hungry mom and her 3 kids at the end of a long day, just wanting a hot meal. Why does it matter if, as a desk jockey, you resolve my trouble ticket faster? Connect the two for me.
Yeah, I think for if you think about the customer experience and the effort put into that, McDonald's in the recent years have launched a number of digital platforms and efforts where now we want to know our customer, for example. It matters, the experience. We have a number of technologies that you may have seen in the news where we no longer, I should say no longer, but if you ever go to a McDonald's and you don't hear someone offer to sell you something, you might want to look around at the digital menu board to see if it's doing it via AI for you, right? And that sort of thing. And it's taking into account contextual things like the weather and the time of day and how many voices it hears in the car. And I'm not telling you it's all out there everywhere today, but we're going there to make it easy for that mom, right? We want to be able to pull the mom's voice out of the crowd and understand, she's in charge and she's the one that needs to be listened to and reverberate back the menu things. And when we think about that, there's an old, I used to support call centers back as part of my healthcare IT career. And we knew back then that if you wanted to know how satisfied your customers were, start with your agents in the call center. See how satisfied they are. How happy are those customers? And it was interesting listening to Wendy talk about all of the tools. You may actually have more tools than we have. I used to think if there's a tool out there, we use it. It sounds like you got them all great. You should have a conversation. What I'd say is I used to think, is employee happiness a KPI or key performance indicator for productivity? And our focus went towards the things that we think make you more productive, including things in the restaurant. So put in things that make things operational easier, get to alerts faster, or that sort of stuff. Get someone's laptop to them the day they show up, right? Versus that. And there was a lot of effort on that, and we think we made great strides. I think what's happening through this post the Great Resignation and things like that, we learned maybe productivity is a KPI for happiness. And if you measure happiness and you measure experience, you might get the rest of that. It might be instead of being a laggard, it might be a leading indicator of how things are going to go, because outcomes for projects sort of speak for themselves, right? So what I'd say is now the linkage is if we have motivated, relatively happy, adjusted employees, there tends to be a dividend that pays off in the rest of the organization. That makes sense, Dan?
Makes a lot of sense. So, Mamoon, I see a direct connection between the experience that faculty and staff have and the experience that students have. How do you think about addressing this challenge?
The biggest thing is a lot of IT guys don't teach, and they don't understand the pain points of the students and the faculty. So engagement is very important. So we get students, we listen to students very, very well. We do surveys after every course. We listen to them, and sometimes we get the students to meet our president. Actually, it's almost always possible. So open door policy, give feedback, more interaction. And sometimes the faculty and the students don't know how to solve the problem. It's IT need to observe the problem and solve it. If they give you requirements, it might be conflicting and not feasible. So observing and solving the problem. You don't ask the customer hey, what do you want students? What do you want faculty? You have to observe the problem and monitor very, very closely what's happening and find the right solution, the optimized solution between the two. So I think also that sometimes the strategy and the even in business, the business model allow this to be possible and not possible. So you got to be flexible in many ways in the business model as well. Because if the business model doesn't allow and the strategy doesn't allow, you cannot do much and solve it. So we are very, very fast changing. We respond immediately to any issue, especially with pandemic and working remote. So we are extremely fast and we are willing to take some risks, because a lot of people don't take risks and, this will happen. We take risk all the time, and we increase customer experience and reduce costs at the same time. So we are very, very flexible and very fast and taking risks.
Jason, you're in the people business, and you live and die by the quality of the customer experiences that you deliver. How do you think about the way technology connects the quality of your employee experience to the quality of your customer experience?
Yeah, well, and you're right, exactly what we do is we help companies create engaging experiences that are intuitive, that are highly automated, and help them get a better world of work presented in their enterprises, both for their peer businesses, their customers, and their internal employees. And one of the challenges in a fast-growing company is that you don't apply that same discipline or logic internally, right? So we've spent a considerable amount of time making sure that we're an absolute showcase of modern ways of working. An example, our CIO has one parent KPI for me, and that is count everywhere where our individual employees enter information more than once and systematically eliminate it. Now, there are secondary and tertiary KPIs underneath that, but the goal is you want an engaging system that can help facilitate culture, that is intuitive to use, right? That feels efficient and modern. And we spend a considerable amount of time internally making sure our systems, pass that muster, if you will. I mentioned that we'd scaled up considerably, built all new systems across our companies. Each employee has somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to upwards 25 IDs, all new IDs for every new employee in the last 10 months. We've taken 2 password resets at our help desk, right? And that just shows you the level of sophistication that we've got, the level of intuitiveness, the level of automation. You don't have to search for those things. Now, as we're a young company, we still have a long way to go, but friction-free employee experiences is the preeminent thing that we're focused on internally.
Jason and Wendy, those are 2 of the best answers I've ever heard about the way to measure the value of the employee experience and how you measure it. That one KPI, that's legendary. I've never heard of being able to measure something like that. Mamoun and Joel, that's a high bar. But curious to get your perspective on how do you quantify or how do you measure the quality of the service experience you deliver to your employees?
So for us, we do large formal surveys, if you will. We call them pulse surveys, where we ask a number of, we try to track a number of factors, whether it's satisfaction with leadership, decision-making, time to decisions, empowerment, a number of things like that. We also have much smaller, I'll call them focus groups in areas. We have a number of internal, we call them networks within McDonald's. For instance, we have a women's leadership network that's internal. We have the McDonald's African American group that's internal, that we do regular check-ins on how we're doing with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We put, some of you may have heard that we've actually announced, like in the news, where we have metrics where our leadership gets measured and their bonuses impacted by the number of female leaders within the ranks director and above in our organization. So these are stated things. They are measurable things. They are, we take the pulse of the organization, constant feedback that we have. I wouldn't say we have some, the Eureka, we've got it all figured out, but there's multiple channels we do to sort of seek that information. So for example, when something happens in the news, whether it's things going on in Russia with our restaurants and our employees there, or it's something that, say, a reporter finds in a Freedom of Information Act and a text that went to the mayor of Chicago, we address it. We don't hide behind it, right? Whereas before it might have been it's not, if it doesn't waive or don't do that. Now we address it, and we specifically hold meetings and get employee perception and opinions and thoughts around what just happened. And I think that's something that's relatively new. The emphasis put on that, I'd say, in the last couple of years.
Ramon?
Yeah, for us, the way we measure it in education, for me, most of our students are masters and PhDs, and I measure it based on their publications, and the customer get what he wants. For example, if he landed a great job on the cutting edge technology in AI, natural language, NLP, and other things, I measure myself based on, all my staff based on the success of our students. 88% employed with big companies like Tesla, Google, Apple, in cutting edge technology. That's how we measure ourselves. Right now, we are at 88% employment for all our students. We try, and that's what matters for me, is that we are on creating new jobs and benefiting everybody. So 80%, I try to achieve 100% with my students.
Also an enlightened KPI. And I know from spending time with you and your leadership team that really is part of the culture. So you're talking to a group of IT leaders who are looking for some coaching about how to justify and ask to senior leadership, CEO, board, et cetera, for increased investment in technology to ultimately deliver better business outcomes. Talk me through, how have you had those tough conversations in the C-suite, with your management, board, et cetera, about how to justify the investment? How do you build the business case?
Well, let's see. Maybe shall I start? Because I've been on both sides of that conversation. I've been the CIO speaking to the board. I've been on the board with the CIO or CTO speaking with me. And look, there are lots of different members of the C-suite. Each member speaks their own functional language. The CMO speaks the language of marketing, and the CFO speaks the language of finance, and the CIO speaks the language of technology enabling business. But the board and the CEO speak the language of company profitability and company longevity and company mission. And so, it's incumbent on members of the senior executive team to speak the language of those from whom they're seeking investment. And so we need to start by educating ourselves around the mission of the company and how these technology investments that we're asking for enable that mission, and put them in context. In the same way that, the CEO doesn't really want to know the details of how, a particular marketing campaign is constructed necessarily. In the same way, we don't need to bring the details of how the technical solution that we're proposing is constructed. Instead, we talk about outcome, we talk about value. It doesn't mean we have to speak financial language. It doesn't all have to be TCO and ROI analysis, but it does have to be related to the value of the company's mission and accelerating some of the company's overall KPIs or objectives or place in the marketplace. And so it starts with a certain humility. Express that humility in coming to the table. And then secondly, be hungry for the same things that the company is hungry for, and exhibit intellectual honesty when asking for the investments that we want. At Nutanix, those are our values: hungry, humble, and honest. And so you show up sharing those same values with the rest of the leadership team. What I found is that checks me, because actually sometimes the beauty of the technical solution, the need to execute cleanly. I'm a nerd, so I can get very OCD and very analytical, and first your socks, then your shoes. That's the only way to do it. And sometimes I need to have some more humility there, and some more connectedness to the overall battle that the company is in, and adjust and find ways to bring technology and our needs in service to the company's mission. That's the biggest secret that I've learned. The last piece of the puzzle is we do not have to do monolithic things. Find ways to chunk the work into bite-sized, reasonable components for which you likely may already have authority and budget to execute a bit. You start to put some bricks in that wall of whatever it is you're trying to execute, and then you'll get a little bit more, right? To whom a little bit has been entrusted, more will be given. And so it's that process of incrementally showing the worth, demonstrating, having a steady drumbeat of value, and then you'll be entrusted with more. I would say, from a board member perspective, executives often don't understand how much authority and how much capacity to do things that they already have. There are many times where you don't need to ask permission. You need to execute with the resources that you have, and then put that in the context of business value to win another round.
Hey, Dan, I want to jump in on that real quick, because something Wendy said really resonated with me. And as we help companies do just that, try to move towards, kind of more business-driven cases, I think it's pretty well understood that, generally speaking, more automated ways of working present a favorable ROI. I think that's kind of well understood across leadership. I think it's less understood that, design and intuitiveness of systems and that employee experience does as well. Because if you can drive more employees to that experience, and there is a good workflow and there's a good return on that workflow in a more efficient way of working, well, obviously, if you drive more experience, you drive an opportunity for greater CSAT for your individual employees and those folks that work in those processes. But there's a tangible ROI underneath that as well, that is just as present as the more standard automation pattern. And so I think that's something we spend a good deal of time talking about with our clients and those that we're advising, is that you should look at these other aspects as well, that also have great CSAT, that also help drive better experiences. But then through that driving of experience, you're driving a business return underneath all of that, as long as you've kind of stitched that narrative together in such a way that there is a return.
Joel or Mamoon, how do you cost justify, or how do you build a business case for increased technology investment?
I think for technologies, I like what Wendy said around, how you got to get the clarity piece of this thing and the transparency, in so many words, Wendy, around how you talk about it, right? The honesty when you talk about it. But I think it's, it's one, you get the buy-in that, do happy employees make better decisions? Do they drive more productivity? The bottom line, does happier employees equate to better business results? I think if you make that connection in an honest way, and you also ask for latitude to try things, because we don't know how it's all going to turn out, and Lord knows Joel doesn't know how to make everybody happy. There's a lot of argument there about what I can do there. But my point is, you got to come with it with integrity. You have to come with it with honesty. You have to say, listen, this is something we need to do, and it matters, and this is why. And if you can make that connection, then I think it's a matter of, if you think about the investments in technology that you're going to make, you try to take what you have and relate it to what you might think is an outcome that's measurable in some way, that drives that, I'll call it happiness KPI or satisfaction KPI. So some of it, for instance, we changed the people that used to run, I'll call it all of the end user computing things, whether it's your phone or your laptop or different things that you want to do, to product owners, and their product is the end user experience. So you now need to figure out how to measure. You need to know your consumer. You need to do things. And what we found is that if you put the right tools and technology to allow them to do that, and de-emphasize a little bit I saved a little bit by renegotiating the contract on what laptops cost. Not that you can't do that, but the focus being on the other piece, and you justify the tools and how you're going to do that. I think here's the McDonald's way. The McDonald's way is not to bet big, right? It may come to a shock to people to realize that McDonald's was not the first to do quick service breakfast. We're not the first to do a drive-through. We're certainly not the first to do to have a global franchise and things like that. But 70 million people a day indicates that something's going right, with the way the thing works, right? And so, by including those technologies as part of the lifecycle management for a product, and the product has to have some consumer outcome. And if that consumer outcome is satisfaction, then you can justify some of the tools and technology you need to make that happen, to bring that about.
Hey, Joel, it's the fries, man. It's the fries.
I thought it was the Diet Cokes. They're icy cold. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, from my side, I'm all my career, like 20, 30 years, I line up always with the customer. If I stand by the customer, look at it from the customer, I don't care how it impacts anybody else. You need to give honest feedback, and you will win at the end. So I've been progressing in my life from a support engineer all the way to a CTO by always being honest and always on the customer side. Actually, if it doesn't work for the CFO, this means the business model is wrong and he's not up to speed. He doesn't know trends. He doesn't understand consumerization of IT. So I faced like so many situations like this. As long as you are on the business side and the customer side, you are always going to convince them sooner or later. So if they are not responding, this means they are not up to speed, and it's time to quit. That's probably one of the reasons we started this episode about why do you quit your job. If you're not on the customer side, it's the wrong trend. Maybe you better move and don't report to this C-level.
We've got questions from the audience in the queue, and I want to get us out of here on time, but I'm not going to go to the audience questions without one last quick fire round, and I've got to get your perspectives on this one. So let's say it's March of 2032, and we're having another version of this conversation. What is one technology in the workplace that, let's say, is commonplace that today might seem like science fiction?
For me,
rapid fire, knee-jerk from each of you. Yeah. Joel, you want to start?
Absolutely. For me, it's I'll call it the artificial interaction, right? So 10 years from now, I can see this happening with, a number of AI agents. Dan, you and I did some work in the past around some bot agents that auto help you solve problems and things like that. This technology is burgeoning today. Natural language progression in 10 years' time, whether you're talking to your airline or your drive-through or your professor, you will be talking to some form of intelligence that has natural language capability to help you do whatever it is you want to do, up to and including predicting things for you, like wearable sensors that will note when you are hungry and provide feedback and things like that. But you will talk to things, and those things will improve the quality of your life, and it will happen the same way you talk to people today.
Joe, you and I have spent time in the test kitchen in Romeoville. And I know that that future is barreling ahead at us really quickly. It's amazing, some of the innovation that is underway at McDonald's. So yeah, wholeheartedly agree with you on that vision. Others? What are we going to be talking about in 10 years?
I like a lot of the technologies surrounding artificial intelligence and talent management, skill alignment, skill prediction. There's a major shortfall of talent in our ecosystem, and so that's something that we spend a considerable amount of time on, is identifying individuals to come in, learn what we do, and grow over that time. So being able to kind of profile and find all those people in the world that would be a great fit and resonate with our jobs is important. As well, with the rise of productivity, with people going home, there's also a rise of burnout, right? That's coming with that. And there are some really interesting approaches from an artificial intelligence perspective to help you understand kind of both sides of the picture. What's the employee experience? What's their happiness, as we used on this call before? But also, what's the burnout factors? What are the things that are drawing energy away from them? and not helping them do their best work. So being able to get some of those technologies in place so you can really get the best analytics on how you're really delivering that experience and how you're taking people not too far in that process and meeting them where they're at, I think is really interesting.
Mamoon?
Yeah, one thing, maybe you realize this from what's going on in the chip industry. I think we are over-engineering devices. The device have so much power that is unutilized. I would invest in 6G and higher speeds and make the mobile device a piece of glass. Because if you look at the waste of electronics, and we need to optimize the supply chain and how devices are being manufactured. 90% of what happened on the device can be done in the data center, which requires no hardware. I think optimization of the device is needed. I can't pay for my children $1,000 or $2,000 for an iPhone, and support is $10,000. I need everything to be so simple. It could be glasses, it could be goggles, it could be a Oculus device, could be a piece of glass. But I think in a classroom, workplace, and moving to the future, I think we are over-engineering everything. We are not simplifying, we are not optimizing, and we are fighting about the chip. If you make everything virtual on the cloud, you don't need this many chips. We are creating we are at the worst case possible in the industry. Everybody has 10 devices in his home, so many hard drives. You know, it's a chaos in each person's house. Data is not centralized. We cannot perform artificial intelligence because data is way scattered all over the place. So we cannot do efficient AI and optimize. I think the whole IT will change because the devices are over. There are many other areas I see coming, but optimizing the device has a significant impact on the chip industry, on who's the leader in the world, and how. Why do I need 1,000 pieces on the Tesla car? Can't I do this on the? So virtualization and optimization is there, and the 10 gigabit per second is coming soon. We are underutilized it. We don't know how to do it, and a lot of business model are not ready for that. That's why the delay in the industry. It is not the future. It's available, but a lot of people build their business on the wrong strategy and the wrong architecture. We are stuck. So that's why we buy an iPhone for $1,300 because, if you look at the data in the past, everything was in the data center, and then we moved it into the device. But it's time to go back. We cannot keep relying on, I want the device to be a zero, no cost. That's what I want. I want to pay only for the bandwidth. That's it.
Wendy, rapid fire. What's ahead?
First of all, I think these NROs, the neuromining operations, I think we're going to start using neuromining data rather than collected behavioral data to inform our algorithms for the endpoint experience. It's cheap, it's pretty accurate, and rapidly delivered. If I can have two, I think the second one is I think the spread of this trend in China. In China, they do this live stream shopping now, where shopping is a blend of a live stream of products, influencers recommending products, and then blending products, actually innovating on a base product to compose a SKU that is purchased in bulk in the live stream. I think that might be the way that people shop, the way that people work, the way that people compose, for example, code, applications, etc., in this blend of the live streaming technology, the influencers or reputation, and infused with data. And hopefully so, because it's actually a very delightful way to compose and work and think.
Brilliant, brilliant. You are all invited back in 10 years, March 2032. when we're going to see how those predictions worked out. We will take a few questions before we wrap up. We'll try to make sure we get you out of here on time. Please, if you enjoyed this conversation, and I sure hope you did, such brilliance in such a short period of time, go ahead and register for this AI newsletter. You'll get monthly delivered to your inbox, insights like the ones the panelists have been sharing today. See the URL there, go.peoplereign.io/register enterprise AI newsletter for a steady stream of insights like this. Before we can wrap up, a few questions from the audience. If we don't get to yours, I'll apologize in advance. We'll make sure we follow up with you offline. Sarah, to your question, yes, this is being recorded. Yes, you will receive a link to watch the video. Mart asks, how do you account for significant international cultural diversity when determining what employees need? We've got a minute or two to answer that. Any thoughts from the panelists?
I got a good one. 600 people, 12 countries, right? You've got to naturalize your work in those areas so that meets those individuals where they are. They need to work in languages they're confident in. They need to read in a way that is consistent with the way they live and work in their everyday environment. So we spend a lot of time trying to get that naturalization layer just right.
Yeah, modern technologies support that. That kind of complexity needs to be supported by machine learning and AI tooling and modern technologies, especially technologies that build translation into the machine learning or natural language processing interface.
I would say, businesses need to be international, and with the fast communication and the available tool, I think distributing the workforce is very, very important.
Good. We have time for one last question, then we'll wrap up. And Sal, I'm going to summarize your question. So Sal's asking, says, we're developing a chat bot, but it's really just kind of a glorified search engine. How can a combination of Thirdera and PeopleReign help make the virtual agent experience smarter? So incorporate an understanding of natural language and help it integrate with workflows. I'll go ahead and take that as we wrap up. So the Thirdera and PeopleReign teams have been explicitly built to address the challenge that Sal asked about. So I mentioned at the top, so the PeopleReign virtual agent speaks 27 languages. It's pre-configured to answer 5 million common work questions. So day one, it's ready for anything that your global team can ask it. And all the panelists talked very eloquently about the value of the employee experience and what it means to demonstrate trust and respect and value for their time. Well, there's no better way than making sure all the easy stuff gets resolved automatically. And I think you'll find, whether it's Sal or anyone else in the audience, as you engage the Thirdera and the PeopleReign teams, we take the approach that Wendy talked about and Joel talked about and everyone else about optimizing for the employee experience. That magic metric that Jason talked about. I know that at Thirdera they embody that spirit that Jason talked about. The only KPI that matters is optimizing around the customer experience or the employee experience. And you'll find that everything about a modern, a mature virtual agent espouses that set of philosophies, that anything that's commonly asked, within a click or two, it should not only be understood, in other words, kind of world-class intent detection, but it should be connected to workflows, dialogues, and ultimately orchestration, because as service providers, we only get credit when the issue is resolved. We don't get credit for having a chatty bot that can exchange pleasantries or tell jokes. We only get credit when the employee is productive again. And so with that as kind of a tee up, I think that was a good question. It kind of summarizes a lot of the themes. I will thank you again on behalf of the panelists. I know I learned a lot. I always get inspired when I talk to you. I appreciate everyone in the audience for joining us today. We will share a link to the recording. We will have additional versions of this conversation. I know this one went by quick, but again, thanks for joining. Please fill out the survey that you're going to be provided with by On24. And again, thanks for your time today.